Yep, we're now live. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Welcome to the Cabinet Panel on the Environment. This is the virtual Cabinet Panel on the Environment meeting that is being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio, video, and online. There is also the opportunity for the public and press to listen to and view proceedings. We also have contributors from various organisations with us here to provide feedback. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take a roll call to confirm that the required members, officers and participants can be heard. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. So when your name is called, please indicate your attendance to confirm the required members, officers and registered speakers are present and can hear and can be heard. So first of all, I've got Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Councillor Allen.
Here.
Councillor Griffiths.
I'm here.
Yeah. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
I'm here.
Yeah. Councillor Cowell.
Here.
Yeah. And then I've got Georgina Chapman.
Present.
James Lees.
Yeah, present.
Louise Overington.
Yep, present.
Jeanette Loudon.
Hello, present.
Andrew Mills.
Present.
Ellie Hollingsworth.
Yep, present.
And James Lovegrove. And I think that's so is there anyone that I haven't called out? No, in that case I'll hand over to the chair.
Thank you, Caroline. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor David Levitt, Councillor Gerald Morris. Gerald Morris gave notice, and so Councillor Cowell will be substituting for Councillor Morris. Just received apologies from Councillor Louise Peace, and it's obviously too late to put a substitution in. Are there any further apologies? Anyone else? No. Okay, all good. Minutes of the previous meeting. I propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the panel held on the 6th of December 2023. Can I have a seconder, please? Steve, thank you. Assuming we're going to approve by consensus, unless anybody's got anything to point out. No, everybody's happy. Okay. Chair's announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is recorded. The recordings will be available on both the council's YouTube page as well as the council's ModGov site. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Members are reminded that this council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that as these are emergencies, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. Notification of a business, there is none. Information note, work programme and action tracker. I'd like to hand over to Georgina Chapman, policy team leader, to present.
Thank you. Yes, so the information note highlights the items which were scheduled in the work programme for Cabinet Panel on the Environment for the 23-24 year. So you'll see Appendix B, we're on the fourth and final topic for this civic year, which is focusing on progress that we've made over the past year. So if I go through the action tracker, maybe before we do the rest of the information note, we have gone through the action tracker and any completed actions have now been archived, so they've been taken off of this main spreadsheet. I think the main things to note on here that have changed is that at EP 49, which is the last action, there's just been some detail in there added about the North Herts Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, which was adopted in September 2023, and a link to the proposed changes that can be viewed. And then the other action, which we've added some commentary to, is the preceding one, EP 46, which is about opportunities to reduce idling in the district. So we did have a discussion with other sustainability officers from other Hertfordshire local authorities to discuss kind of what approach everyone's taking to idling or anti-idling. there are kind of several pieces of legislation which could support local authorities to enforce against idling, but no council that we spoke to within Hertfordshire reported that they currently do anything to enforce against this, mainly because there are issues around resourcing that enforcement and also demonstrating that there is an quality issue in the areas where the enforcement would be most pertinent. So that's kind of where that is at the moment. And we've just added a note to say that the county council were investigating the approach that they wanted to take to anti-idling on their own sites, and they've now banned vehicle engine idling at all of their sites. So that includes schools and care homes and household waste recycling centres as well. If we go back to the information note, so if I take you through some of our activity, so contributions to the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, the HCCSP. So we had an annual event in November, which was a chance for stakeholders to feedback on the action plans that the HCCSP developed. North Herts lead on the biodiversity plan, and we've now finished working through the feedback that we got on that plan at that event. And we've noted the key themes of the feedback, and we'll be looking at incorporating that when we revise the action plan, which will be when the local nature recovery strategy for Hertfordshire is complete, and that work is currently ongoing. We are also working on, as part of the HCCSP, the adaptation subgroup. So the focus of that subgroup's work at the moment has been compiling a draft climate risk log, which is kind of looking at risks to council services from changing climate and risks to the district from changing climate. So we've drafted that, and it's been kind of reviewed now by our North Herts' internal climate officer group, and it's also been reviewed by the risk lead, and the risk management group are now looking at the potential to include a climate risk on our overall risk register around failing to adapt council services to the changing climate. And then the kind of focus of the HCCSP adaptation subgroup going forward is going to be on developing an action plan around adaptation. Also through the HCCSP, the second round of Solar Together is now closed. So 185 households in North Herts have accepted their solar PV recommendation through the second round. iChooser's calculation is that the average price saving achieved for the average 14-panel system within the scheme is 34% cheaper than typical market price for an equivalent system. Their market research for that is based on them gathering quotes, I think around 100 quotes, and then calculating based on that. The installations have now begun, and as of Monday, there have been 289 installations completed across Hertfordshire, and about 50 of those in North Herts. And then finally on the HCCSP, you might have seen that the Hertfordshire Growth Board announced their missions for the county, and one of those is Sustainable County, and sustainability is also mentioned within several of the other missions, and the HCCSP is also referred to within the missions and given a specific remit around developing a local area energy plan. So there'll be a kind of working group from the HCCSP formed to kind of look at that work shortly. The home upgrade grant, this remains open to application. So this is a scheme which is aiming to provide free home improvements to improve the energy efficiency of homes for anyone that's kind of at risk of fuel poverty. It's only open to off-gas homes and homes that have an EPC rating of D, E, F or G. The main thing to note here is that the income threshold has increased from £31,000 a year to £36,000 a year, so there should now be more eligible residents than there were previously. So we're now kind of marketing that change in income threshold. The next thing on the list is the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme. So you might have seen that we put an application into the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, and we were successful in that application. So we've secured up to £7,743,224 from that Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme for the decarbonisation of our leisure centres. So that's kind of looking at installing air source heat pumps, solar PV and various energy efficiency measures at the leisure centres. So we need to kind of set up a project board and do some detailed feasibility before that project can move forward. But in line with the kind of rules of the funding, the project needs to be completed by March 2026. And the initiatives are aiming to achieve annual savings of 1,176 tonnes of carbon. I'm going to skip to the Community Investment Fund. So the Community Investment Fund, this was the fund that the council had open for community groups to apply for capacity building activities, which would result in something of community value. So there have been several successful applicants from that who are using their allocation to work on green projects. So one of those is the Green Heat Co-op. So they're using their award to develop and launch a home energy and retrofit advice service to improve energy efficiency and reduce carbon emissions from homes. Initially focused on the Royston area, but then looking to kind of roll out more broadly across North Herts. The Baldock Allotment and Leisure Gardens Association are using their allocation of funding to develop a piece of land in Baldock to create 30 extra half plots to meet local demand for allotments. And then Create Community and Green Care at Norton entered a collaborative bid. They already work together a lot. So many Create Community participants go on to volunteer with Green Care, and Create Community are using their allocation towards hiring a volunteer manager, and Green Care will be improving their grounds maintenance and expanding their locally grown flower social enterprise with their portion of the funding. I'm going to hand over to Ellie for the section on climate engagement.
Thank you, George. I'm Ellie, the Policy and Strategy Trainee. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of the Climate Hive engagement page for North Herts. So the Climate Hive has been running for about a year now and has proven successful in engaging with residents and updating them on climate and sustainability topics. So in March last year, 2023, we had just over 100 subscribers, and now we've got over 350. Over the course of the year, we've provided updates on energy efficiency schemes, sustainability tips and products, details for the Cabinet Panel for the Environment, adaptation, information, green skills, as well as some district-wide surveys. We've engaged with residents on a number of discussion topics, so on how to reach our net zero targets, as well as how to have a sustainable Christmas, and sort of just general contributions to climate action. Throughout January of this year, we ran a successful question and answer platform on sustainability, with residents sending their questions to Councillor Jarvis. These questions were on a range of topics on biodiversity, wildlife, solar PV, retrofit, active travel and transport, and waste. And we'll continue to keep residents updated on the action that the council has taken towards climate and sustainability, and also information for residents on how they can help towards our sustainability targets as well. Thank you, and I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you very much, both of you. That was fantastic. Does anybody have any questions for Ellie and George? I'll do my best to spot them on this list. Okay, thank you very much. Looks like you're sorry, it looks like there's no questions there or anything. So I'm going to move over to the Flex Collect update, which is with Louise Overington and Jeanette Loudon. Thank you.
Sorry, Amy, was James not coming in first for the Solar for Business update?
I've got you're absolutely right. Sorry, I've jumped it. My thing's jumped and it moved me ahead. So I'm just going to push this back up so I've got all the details. Thank you. Right. Sorry. So up next, actually, we have James Lees, Climate Change and Sustainability Project Manager, to present the Solar for Business update. James, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Hi everyone. So yeah, as Councillor Allen said, so my role here is Climate Change and Sustainability Project Manager. I'm quite new to the council, only been in post for just over 6 months now. And one of the projects I've been looking at in terms of whether it's something we could deliver at North Herts is this Solar for Business project. And I think so I believe it went to Cabinet yesterday. So I believe we're now likely to get an allocation from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which, as I'm sure you all know, is a pot of money from the UK government. And alongside that allocation, some investment from the council as well to establish a pilot of this scheme. And what this solar for business scheme is it involves North Wales Council paying to install solar panels on the roofs of commercial units in the district, and then those solar panels then generate renewable electricity, and that electricity is then used by the businesses in those commercial units, and they pay a kind of discounted rate compared to using electricity from the grid to use that generated electricity. And then this project has multiple benefits really. Obviously, it generates renewable electricity, which reduces carbon emissions, contributing towards our 2040 ambitions for the district to be net zero. It saves the businesses who participate money on the electricity bills, and also brings in a revenue for the council as well. So there's potential for this scheme to be to have long-term sustainability. The scheme is based on a similar scheme which has been run successfully by West Suffolk District Council for a number of years now. They've installed solar panels on over 80 businesses in their district, and generated a lot of renewable electricity, and supported a lot of businesses alongside that. I suppose two kind of key things I wanted to highlight, kind of in terms of who the businesses are that this project would be aimed at. They are businesses around the district who are quite high users of electricity, but locally based, usually SMEs based in kind of large, in commercial units in and around industrial estates. So it's not primarily aimed at high street shops or anything like that. It's aimed at more at higher users of electricity in larger commercial premises. The other thing, I suppose I want to say, in terms of, I suppose, kind of next steps on that project, are going to be identifying some businesses. So we've got a bit of outreach planned, but if participants have ideas of locations, and they're very welcome to get in touch through the cabinet panel email, and we're very keen to hear from people. So yeah, that's probably a bit of an overview. Happy to answer any questions about that, or elaborate further if that's helpful. But yeah, it forms part of our wider climate change strategy.
That's great, thank you, James. Does anyone have any questions for James, or anything you would like him to expand upon or elaborate on at all? Nope, looks like you covered everything, James. Right, so with that sorted, now we can go over to the FlexCollect update with Louise Ovington and Jeanette Loudon.
Thank you, Amy. I'm just going to try and share my screen, so bear with me. So hopefully you can all see that now.
Yep, I can see it.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, 1 second. So myself and Louise are from the Shared Waste Service team, and we're going to give an overview of our recent trial of the flexible soft plastics trial that we've been doing in North Herts recently. So those that are not already aware, the government have recently carried out a lengthy consultation relating to waste and recycling provision in England. The main driver was to increase rates of recycling across the country. The outcome of the consultation is simpler recycling, which has been introduced into legislation through the Environment Act 2021. Another driver was to provide a consistent approach throughout England on what can and cannot be recycled. There's a number of additional elements added under the new legislation. Amongst them is the need for all local authorities to collect the same recyclable waste streams for recycling or composting from households. The recycling waste streams include paper and cards, plastic, metal, glass, food waste, and garden waste. As part of the plastic material stream, soft plastics are to now be included in the curbside collection from 2027. This means items such as film lids, crisp packets, chocolate and biscuit wrappers, which we don't currently collect here in North Herts. However, as our waste and street cleansing contract is due to be renewed in 2025, we're taking this opportunity to include this new material into our waste contracts from 2025. Coincidentally, an opportunity presented itself to us at the end of 2023. The Flexible Plastic Fund approached us to see if we'd be interested in joining their national trial. So we would like to share with you an overview of how we introduced this to a small number of properties within our waste service area, how it's gone so far, how we are now looking to expand the trial into the near future. So for an overview, the trial is fully funded to collect soft plastics. So it's been funded by the Flexible Plastic Fund, DEFRA, Smart Sustainable Plastic Packaging, and EcoSurety. So East and North Herts, as I said before, we're a shared waste service team. We are only one of 7 local authorities selected to participate within this trial. So the trial is to gain an insight to the different types of soft plastics that are being presented by residents, the level of participation that we're going to see from residents in the areas, and any operational issues that both from a collection perspective and from a processing perspective, we might have to overcome. This will be ahead of our 2025 waste and recycling contract, and obviously ahead of the government's implementation of the legislation in 2027. So initially we had discussions with both our MRF, so our materials recycling processor, Pierce Recycling, based in St Albans, and Urbasa, who are our current waste and recycling contractor. Because obviously we need to get buy-in from all the partners into this scheme to try and make it as successful as possible. So due to the current processing capabilities at the MRF, we jointly decided to use the option of using the survival bags for this trial. So this is opposed to using the option of just putting the plastics in loose into the mix of the dry materials or the dry recycling materials. So the initial trial area was chosen due to the close proximity of the MRF, so the material recycling facility, because we needed to do a direct delivery. This was because through the initial discussions with our partners, we thought it was too big of a risk to put the material into our tipping shed at Buntingford. So we were looking for areas that would allow the crews to direct deliver to St Albans with the least minimum impact on that crew. So this went to Cabinet in October 2023 and was agreed. So we commenced the start of the trial in November 2023. So we've approximately got 2,000 properties currently in the scheme in the Knebworth area. So the initial part of the trial was based a lot around the communication to try and obviously get the buy-in from residents, to let them know and inform them as to what type of materials they can place in the bags and how we was going to do this for them. So there was an initial leaflet that was posted out to residents a couple of weeks ahead of the trial. And then there was a secondary leaflet, and the bags were then hand delivered off the week prior to the service commencement. So we also had boots on the ground, so some contract officers from the Waste Shared Service team were out and about as well as some supervisors from Urbasa to make sure that the delivery of the bags were done and posted through the letterbox, and to answer any queries of any residents that did come out to speak to them at the time. So to give you just an oversight of the leaflets, as you can see here, we have the leaflet that was delivered, showing on the front the types of plastic that can be included and how we can do it. There's also, it's not very clear on here, but you can see a description of the bag here with it tied at the top. So just up here, just so that we're asking it to be tied. So as part of the trial as well, we had an OOPS sticker So this was used by the crews for any contamination that they seen within the bags and also for any untied bags. So this element was quite important because obviously our vehicles use a compaction on the vehicle. So if those bags were to split or if they were loose and they came undone within the actual body of the vehicle, then all of the plastics would then be diluted throughout the whole of the load and it would have contaminated our paper. So moving on to initial collections. So the residents were requested to place the Flex Collect blue bags on top of their blue paper boxes. So as you can see in the diagram there attached. So the crews were asked to then take that bag of flexible plastics and place it in with the paper in the split-bodied vehicle. This was then direct delivered to our MRF processing unit in St Albans. And this was then hand baled out of the paper section. So we decided to put the blue bags in with the paper because it was very obvious, the actual blue bags amongst all of the white paper. If it had gone in with the dry mix recycling side of it, it would have been very difficult for this to have been handballed out of that element. So this way, as you can see from the picture, the blue bags were taken out of the paper content and placed in the dumpy bag, as you can see. So the results so far, we have got the graph that you can see there in front of you. So we've got the blue bags, the collection of the blue bags here, the blue line, and then we have the weight here at the bottom, and then the average weight. So just to let you know, we've got some updated information that we had from our collection yesterday, because it is a fortnightly collection to be in line with our recycling week. So yesterday we actually collected an additional 782 bags, which is in fact the second highest collection of bags that we've had since the trial started. And that came in at a weight of 265 kilograms. So we're really, really pleased with that. And since the start of the trial, we've collected over 6,500 blue bags of soft plastics with a total weigh-in weight of just over 2.5 tonnes. So I think that's absolutely fantastic that the residents of Knebworth have been able to participated within that and provided such, quantity of material for us to then help to analyse going forwards. Recycling participation rates, we are looking at around 36% at the moment of residents that are actually setting out blue bags with the with their weekly recycling collection. So feedback from residents, as you can see, it's been really positively received by residents. I've put a couple of items up there of some resident feedback for you to take a look at. In addition to that, we have also been receiving requests for additional blue bags. So where people have been using more than the one a week, they've been maybe presenting 2, maybe 3 on occasions. And so they have run out. And so we've been receiving some requests, which is, again, really positive. So we did have some issues and concerns during the trial and the implementation. The first one was the bag delivery. Because Urbasa, our contractor, did use some agency staff, they weren't fully aware of the area. So there was some additional support that was given out to the delivery crews at that time. We also had some concerns on the actual collection days that there could be some potential breakdowns with the vehicles. This would then mean that we would have to have secondary crews come out to assist those crews who may not have been fully aware of the trial, or it could have slowed up the actual whole collection with having multiple vehicles having to then go to St Albans to drop those bags off. Luckily, we haven't experienced that to date. The other concern was the impact on time and resource of the direct delivery to Pearce Recycling, but to date that hasn't really been a concern, and I think that was quite important in the selection of the initial area that was chosen for the trial to minimise that impact to the crews. So costs, obviously they are always a concern. As I said at the beginning, this was fully funded, but obviously there is obviously still a budget to be kept to. So that budget consisted of the bag delivery, the leaflet production and delivery, and also the processing costs with our partners at the MRF. Another concern that we had to consider moving forward when I go on to the expansion was the space and capacity that we have at our site at Buntingford. For those that may have been there, it's not a huge site, and we do have a transfer station at the back of the site there. So we was looking at ways that we can obviously look to expand the trial in the future in line with the space and capacity that we had at the depot. So good points of the initial trial. So all of the crews adapted really well to the use of the new material stream and what to do with it. So we had no real concerns with the bags going into the wrong side of the vehicle. Observations from the contract officers on the ground seen less contamination in the commingled recycling bins. And as I've already mentioned, the trial has been received well by residents with a positive feedback and already receiving requests for additional bags coming in. So there seems to be a keenness from all parties to expand and test further options. So then we moved on to phase 2. So on the 20th of February, the crews then mixed the blue bags in with the dry mixed recycling to see how the survival bags would cope. Obviously, there's a different content of material on that side of the vehicle. So we have obviously sharp objects such as glass and cans on that side. So although the survival bags are purpose made to deal with that type of situation, we obviously needed to see how that would react with the mixture of waste that we were receiving in North Herts. So also the direct delivery to Pierce. For this one-off occasion, the crews did continue to direct deliver to Pierce, and this was then deposited off, and the whole load was then processed through the MRF. Now, because this was slightly different to the previous operation, they had 2 extra staff members on the picking belt, basically. So where you have the picking belt where the material goes through, and then the blue bags were then picked off at the initial front end of the MRF. So overall, it was deemed a success. There was a few split bags that were seen due to maybe some bags not being tied up correctly or coming into contact with sharp objects where it was compressed within the vehicle. And the quantity of bags collected that week was slightly lower than the previous weeks. However, overall, as I said, it was a success. So we moved on to phase 2.1. So from the 5th of March, we took the decision for the crews to no longer direct deliver and to tip off at Buntingford. So this was obviously one of the concerns that we raised earlier about the space capacity, but we segregated the specific crews. So there was 3 crews that do the flex collections in Knebworth. So when those crews came into the depot, they were segregated to one section of the bay for the mixed recycling. So Pierce Recycling then hauled the material out as normal from Buntingford. They collected it in one load that was segregated for the blue bag section. And again, would like to, really pay homage to the collection crews and the operational side of things here. It was an overall success. There was no issues with the segregation at Buntingford, the haulage, or the processing at the processing plant. So due to the overall success and agreement for the crews to continue to, we've agreed for the crews to continue to tip at Buntingford for the rest of the trial. So that was really good news for the crews, because although there was no real negative impact, it was obviously a lot easier for the crews to just go direct to Buntingford and then back to their base at Letchworth. So here's a section of the picture. So this is from the tipping hall this morning. So as you can see, we've got 3 pictures here of the whole of the loads that have been delivered, and you can quite clearly see the blue bags pictured throughout the content of material there. The middle picture here, you can clearly see the tie on the bag. So this is where the bag has been deposited in the back of the dust carts. It's been compacted, and then it's been pushed out at the other side at the tipping hall in Buntingford. It's all still in one piece, and it's still tied up and intact. So that's a perfect example of what we would like to see going forward. So with that, we've now looked at the expansion of the trial. As part of the trial, we had agreed that we would look to expand the area to around 10,000 properties. This was something that the Flex Collect people wanted us to do, to make sure we can get as much capture of material as we can, that they can do compositional analysis on, and hopefully build that picture up of what we need to do going forwards for the collection of soft plastics. So we selected some further areas to be included in the trial. So we needed and would like to have included areas from both North Herts and East Herts. So we have an additional 6,500 properties approximately in the North Herts area, and approximately 2,000 properties that we will be providing the trial to in East Herts. So the demographics had to be considered on this. So as part of the trial, we had to make sure that there was a mixture of the different areas, urban, rural, and the different demographics. So the areas were selected for that purpose, and that has been approved. And also the crews, to make sure that it was crews working on the right week, collecting the right material that could then be processed the same week for our processor. So it wasn't just looking at the collection areas in North or East Herts, but it was looking at ensuring that we're minimising the impact with our processing partner, because obviously, as I said, they had to employ some additional members of staff. So we wanted to condense that to a 2-window period, so they got the maximum resource available usage there. So we will be doing some more targeted comms similar to what I showed you before. And as I said, it could be in, different crews, however, in the same town. So we will be doing some more communications and some more bag deliveries in the existing trial period of Knebworth. That's going out this week. And then we'll be looking forward to instigating the further bag deliveries and leaflets for the new trial area, so which we are looking to commence in July 2024. So what next? So an agreement of expansion of trial bar members. So pleased to announce that last night at Cabinet that was approved. So we will be going ahead with that. We're just waiting for the final sign off with our East Herts exec member, but we think that will go through without any issues. So we're really, really pleased with how that's gone. As I mentioned before, the demographical areas have been considered and have now been confirmed. The funding has now been authorised, so we've got 2 tick boxes there, and so we're going great guns ahead now to hopefully commence that scheme and expansion in July 2024. So that's it from me. So I'm open to any questions for myself or Louise to answer from anybody on the trial.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny. Can I just bring up the participants so I can see if there's any hands up? I can't see any at the moment, unless anyone needs to be waving at me.
Sorry, yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course you can.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. So I noticed about the feedback. I might have missed it, but were there any critiques or people asking questions about how to improve the service, and were those acknowledged? And is there a plan to act upon them?
The only comments that we received back were basically, when are we going to get it? So people that weren't included in the initial trial period were wanting to receive that service, and so they were asking us questions as to, oh, when is it going to be expanded? Why haven't we got it over here? The only one that I can actually remember is where we had a comment from somebody on the outskirts of Knebworth who was included in the trial area, where they had put their bag out for collection and a fox had got to it. So there was a bit dismayed and concerned at that. But my colleague Louise, she does deal a lot with the contact of residents on this scheme. So I don't know if Louise has got anything else to add to that.
We did have someone today actually who received their top up of bags, and they emailed us and very politely said that they took all of their soft plastics to the local supermarket and they didn't want to participate in the trial, and could we please take the bags back? At which point I tried to my very best, my sales hat on, to encourage the particular resident to join the scheme, even if it was just for the period of those bags, because it was important for us to see as Jeanette mentioned, what kind of plastics people have, what kind of quantities they have, what kind of composition that might be, how we can make it through the whole system to the recycling end of things. So participation wasn't just to get that material out of their residual waste, it was to test sort of the end-to-end method. So I'm hopeful, I haven't heard back from this particular resident, but I am hopeful that we don't have to take the bags back from her. But it was positive that she was already undertaking that recycling under her own steam anyway.
A lot of the supermarket collections are specifically connected to TerraCycle, and TerraCycle tend to recycle the products into things like equipment for schools and playgrounds and stuff like that. So if the resident has like a big there's a driving force behind that perhaps. But yes, no, I totally agree with you, Louise. It is really helpful. We have so many people involved to actually. So my 10-year-old's suddenly curious. Yes, so I'm just going to go over to Steve, who just put his hand up. See if there's anybody else.
On that last point, I mean, we presumably don't expect 100% participation, and the trial will still work without. I'm tempted to say, if you put all the bags inside one of the other bags, can you then recycle the bags? Since presumably they're the same sort of soft plastic. But that actually, the question I was originally going to ask was, how are we telling people what they can put in the bags? Because I think one of the issues we've always had is with the dry recycling is what can you put in and what you can't. And if we're not clear about that, then people will either put in things they shouldn't, or they'll put things in their purple bin if they're not sure.
Yep, so I think that's a very fair point. So the initial leaflet that went out via the post was one that had already been tried and tested in some of the other trial areas. So WRAP was brought in to create the communications, and they did a pictorial list of the yes please and the no thank you. There's also a supporting website that the funders created to support all of the schemes, so that sits as a link in the leaflet and also on the website. So that was the initial leaflet introducing the scheme, and then there was a further follow-up to that alongside of the bags as well, and the bags have also got some information printed on them. So it's kind of 3 opportunities to check what information people might be getting there to know what exactly to put in. But also part of the trial will be, have people been able to follow those instructions? Do we need to make sure they're clearer? So I think a lot of that information will come to light as those items are processed as well.
And I think, am I right in saying that the only reason there are bags is to keep the trial separate from everything else? And that if it's introduced for everyone, we won't have to provide bags, because presumably we don't actually want to provide a lot of plastic bags and increase the amount of
if we can avoid it, yeah, if we can avoid it. So for the trial purposes, the idea was to contain the material, because at the moment our MRF at Pierce, they don't have the technology to be able to separate those plastic items out. They present themselves like paper with the other materials, so it's very difficult. The technology isn't there to retrieve them individually. The long-term hope, obviously by 2027, is that all MRFs taken in material will then have the capacity to sort without the addition of another bag. So I think that's obviously being explored, but for the purposes of this trial, we needed something to be able to contain that material, hold it without splitting, be vibrant, which is why they've gone with the blue colour, just to be able to really pull them out and see what we're looking at in terms of tonnage and participation.
Okay, and is there going to be some sort of report in terms of percentage of waste that we divert?
Yep, so the fund itself released their first initial findings. We didn't quite make the cut on that because we'd just started our trial, but in conjunction with the Flexible Collect project, we'll be doing a lot more intelligence. And obviously we're being compared with other trial areas who might be using slightly different approaches to capturing the material as well. So as much as we're as a trial to determine ourselves what's happening, we're also being pitched against other ways and other methods of collecting the material as well, which is why we accepted the funding and we're quite happy to take part in that. At the moment, we are being pipped at the post by Malden, who have got a weekly collection of the soft plastic. So it is an interesting comparison to see how people participate based on maybe how frequently the bags are collected as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions or comments on the scheme? No? Okay. Right. Moving on to Wilding and B corridor update. If we could have Andrew Mills, the service manager for Green Space, to present, that would be great. Thank you.
Evening, everybody. Thank you for your time this evening. I was asked to do something about as an update about Wilding and particularly about Royston, and it's not there on the agenda. So forgive me if the presentation's a little bit skewed towards Royston, but hopefully not too much. Really, we got into the Wilding thing back in 2020, and it was really sort of coming to the fore when we were in lockdown with the pandemic and that, and we were sort of just at the cusp of trying to introduce Wilding as a trial into the district at the point of the first lockdown, and we really sort of stumbled a little bit as our attention was distracted by other broader things. But to get to where we were trying it out, we had undertaken a Wilding audit. We commissioned Countryside Management Services to look at all our larger open spaces across the district to actually sort of consider if there was opportunities for us to undertake opportunities to improve biodiversity in our parks, open spaces, highway verges and that sort of thing. And the actual time frame of the lockdown and that was an ideal opportunity for that study to be undertaken. So that the first place that we tried that was at Weisbrook in Letchworth, and that's one of the big verges on the left-hand side off Letchworth Gate as you drive in towards Letchworth just after the Longabout. And that was really our toe in the water. And what we've seen is a cascade across the district, and we've now seen that the enthusiasm for Wilding has really sort of taken off, and we're really sort of quite encouraged by the reception that we've been getting. If I sort of think back to 5-10 years ago when we were merrily going around every 2 weeks cutting the grass across the district to the same height, we were quite heavily criticised if the grass got long and or if there was dandelions in the grass or things like that. Whereas now the situation is reversing quite significantly, and we're actually receiving a 50-50 sort of type number of inquiries, phone calls, conversations where people are complaining, or not complaining, but commenting, when's the grass going to be cut? But the other side of the coin is that residents are sort of saying, you're cutting the grass too much. So there is a compromise to be struck there, and it's horses for courses really, and it is right time, right place for some scenarios. It's worthwhile sort of commenting that Wilding is a really broad sort of term for environmental management, and there's lots of different aspects to that sort of the word just Wilding. So at its most extreme, you could look at the Wilding in our local nature reserves such as Orton Head Common, Norton Common, Western Hills and things like that. That is really a rich habitat, and that is Wilding in its true sense. And the Wilding that we've really been trying to focus on over the last 3 or 4 years is that in the urban areas, where in the built environment, actually in the town centres, which is not normally where you would actually sort of see wildlife, and it's probably been and biodiversity has been most heavily impacted by human activity and life generally. And so we started to look at trying to manage, introduce flowers and habitat for bees and things like that. And we introduced the sort of annual wildflower sort of seed mixes, and you'd see those along, say, in ribbons along Letchworth Gate, or in Baldock opposite the traffic lights by Avenue Park. That is a wild seed mix. It is wild to a point in that it is using cornflowers and annuals like that, not the traditional sort of seasonal bedding that you would normally or would traditionally seen from in Victorian parks and things. Those areas do attract insects, and they've created a lot of attention from people passing by, but it is managed, it is cultivated, the seeds have to be sown every year, there's irrigation that takes place, the ground is fertilized, so that's not true wilding in its sense. The other sort of wilding is actually trying to encourage the actual wild diversification in the grass sward in those areas that we've been looking at. And we've been trialling that, and Weisbrook was the first one, and we just started off by changing our mowing regimes to start with and saw what came up. We've subsequently sown wildflower seed mixes into that sward, and you'll have seen that those areas look like they've been rotivated a little bit, and that was the year before last. And we're now at a stage where we can actually start to see the fruits of that work and that investment. You have to let the seed establish and germinate. If you let it germinate and then flower in the first year and flower, basically it will put all its energy into producing that flower and basically die, and the grass already in the ground would just outcompete that plant. By mowing it reasonably short to about 40 millimeters in the first year, you force that plant to create a strong basal plant that can then compete with the grass on equal terms and vigor, and hopefully after it's flowered will be able to survive, have enough energy there to come through on a perennial basis. So Weisbrook and other locations will be coming through in the next few years, where we sort of this year will be the first real year that we're actually going to be starting to leave those areas to see the flowers come through. All being well, we should see that being a lot more colourful in the summer, but it's really expectations are something that we have to manage. People seem to think that they're expecting a wildflower meadow, and that's not usually going to be the case. That what you'd see on Countryfile, for example, they're the top, the best sort of examples that you can give, and they take many years to sort of develop and establish. So we're at the very beginning of that journey, and our results are going to be a lot more realistic, to be honest. If I could, I'd like to try and share my screen, and just wanted to show you the sort of information that a resident had provided to us in Royston, and we were able to work with the resident and in other residents, and this is really positive that this as an initiative came proactively to us from a member of the public. And we had a number of conversations with Abby, and she's done an absolute fantastic job, and we've taken on board some of her suggestions, and she's now working with Royston Town Council, and we're actually doing more areas beyond this. But just to give you an example of the sort of things that you can see, which hopefully is this one. Can you see that? So this is it's just the PDF, and this is the sort of information that Abby provided to us. And as you can see, there's a whole host of locations across the Royston town. This is absolutely brilliant information that we was looking for. And Abby did this all of her own voluntary she'd volunteered this information in her own time, and she provided photographs, descriptions, suggestions for each one of those locations on the map that you saw at the beginning. And that really did work for us. And we were able to then take this information away, investigate the land ownership issues. Was there any highway issues? Was there any sort of any services in the ground that might be stopping us from doing any work to the ground and things like that? And we did settle on a number of sites, and it's really sort of taken off. And as I said, Abby has sort of now working with the town council, and we're doing 2 extra locations on top of this year. And Royston's really starting to look a little bit different. So really just wanted to sort of compliment Abby on what she's been doing for us over in Royston, and this has been ideal. So if I can just sort of click on to the next screen, which is just a few sort of pictures, which should be this one. And basically, I just really wanted to show some of the successes that we've had with what we've been doing so far. So the first picture is just literally a picture of a cornflower that you'd see in along Letchworth and that sort of thing. This is an annual flower that you would see. We would have to replace this annually in the more managed sort of wildflowering. The next picture is a bank in Lanark on the Jackman's estate, and this is something that we did for Settle Housing. And this was a bank that wasn't growing grass, and Wilding loves ground that is not very nutritious. And this was an ideal result. And we got a lot of compliments of this, and because it was a bank, it actually worked really well for the operatives because they didn't have to mow it, so we're not putting them at risk working on the bank. So they improved the operative safety as well as a side issue. So another picture there of the same area, you can see, which has worked really well, and you can see that some of these flowers are seeding already, and we're hopeful that that will come back, and we're going to do the same again in this location. This is Waysbrook, and you can see some of the areas where we've done the different trials on the mowing, and these areas have now been sown with additional seed in those areas, and we're hopeful that they will look a little bit different this summer. We have a creepy crawly tower, a big bug hotel in Howard Gardens, which obviously does. We know we're all encouraging for the insects, and this is one of the things that we did with some volunteers and the friends in Howard Gardens, and that's been really successful. This is the second reiteration of the bug hotel in Howard Gardens, so and it's been really quite successful and quite popular. And the whole thing has really accumulated in the suggestion from John O'Connor's about creating a bee corridor. And the bee corridor is trying to link together the community to try and use their own spaces, their own promotion and their own activities to create corridors for bees, other insects, wildlife, etc. And this is an initiative that came to us from John O'Connor's, and they could see that while we've been doing pieces of work on a patchwork quilt type thing, there was an opportunity to link those patches together if we could coordinate residents and businesses together. And I've got 3 dubious people here who went out and did some door knocking, and so we've got, as you can see, the logo that we've asked people to put up in their windows to promote the bee corridor. We've done some initiatives where we've done some planting up. We've looked at the locations. We've tried to change the planting in our shrub beds to give landing platforms for pollinators and things like that at different times of the year. So You'll see in Howard Gardens at the moment, at the bottom of Station Road, there's an area of bulbs that are coming up that we planted up as part of this. We've done the bee bombs that we've been providing as part of the bee corridor as well. Again, this is the sort of thing that we're sort of like looking to try and achieve. And this is all trying to do it in a collective, cohesive way so that there is a way for insects to travel through our towns with a food source throughout. Otherwise, you know, some areas could be very much like a desert, if you like, for those insects. These are some of the areas that Abby identified in her maps at the beginning of my presentation, and you can see that within a normal grass verge, it's still possible to do something that's quite attractive on a junction in a relatively small area. It doesn't have to be a big area at all. And this is Abby and her husband, Councillor Jarvis, and my colleague Neil Ferry, who did all the hard work for us and the liaison over in Royston. And they're very proud of what they did, and it has created a lot of attention there. And further examples and a close-up of a bee. And yeah, so I'll stop sharing because I'm waffling now. Yeah, so the whole bee corridor thing is now taking off, and with the budget that was approved from April the 1st this year into moving forward, we've been fortunate enough to secure the budget for expanding the bee corridor project into all the urban areas. So that will be Royston, Baldock and Hitchin as well. So I'd like to thank councillors for their support of that initiative with that budget. And we're already talking to John O'Connor's. I had a meeting earlier on in the week with Royston Town Council. Councillor Hinchcliffe was there, where we're talking about wilding, and I raised the bee corridor at that point. So hopefully we'll be able to get some ideas about how we can expand the bee corridor initiative across a bigger area, you know, considering that it's been a very good sort of well-received project by residents, and it's something that we should be doing more, and it covers a lot of the issues and the concerns that both the council and residents have regarding our environment at the moment. You can wake up now. So.
We're very awake and paying attention, Andrew. Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Hinchcliffe has been telling me about how fantastic the flowery borders look over in Royston, and he wasn't wrong. That looks wonderful. My 10-year-old just reminded me that she really wants to build a bug hotel, and I'm just not going to have an excuse to not have a massive one in my garden, am I? I'm going to have to just get off. And also your explanation about the wildflowers and how they establish and compete with the grass also explains why I haven't just been able to throw some seed on my lawn and magically have a meadow. So I need to do a much better job, because at the moment all I've got is flower beds with bulbs in. So I'm just going to go over to any questions or queries from anybody, or anybody who maybe wants some advice on how to get more of a meadow going on in their garden as well. Anybody at all? No. So it was pretty extensive, that, Andrew. It really was. I found that really helpful. Right.
No, thank you. If you old pallets are really good for bug hotels. If you looked at the one in Howard Gardens, then you'll see that it is basically consists of some pallets that are just fixed together, and then all the bits are just stuffed into the front, and we just put a fancy roof on it. So the original bug hotel had a flat roof, and we put a green roof on it, so it was turf that we put on the top, and we actually had wildflowers growing on the top of the bug hotel at that point. So it is possible to do it. You can buy bug hotels from garden centres and things like that, and we have got a couple of them here, and they're no bigger than a bird box. So it's very it's really good fun.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to do it. She's not going to let me get away with it this year again. So no, it's absolutely fantastic. The meadows look wonderful. Driving in through Letchworth Gate, seeing just the long stream of poppies and cornflowers at the side of the road, it just looks really pretty. and obviously doing a wonderful job as well. But also, you know, the aesthetically pleasing part bit is awfully nice too, as well as the really important ecological factor. Right. If everyone's had opportunity to have a think about all of the presentations tonight, has anybody come up with any other questions they want to ask on oh gosh, I'll put my teeth back in, of any of the presentations that have happened tonight? Or is everybody happy? Georgina's laughing at me.
I have a question actually, which I could have asked Andrew anyway a dozen times in the past, but let's ask it now. I mean,
Yeah.
The conditions, the ground conditions vary enormously across the district. So Royston is certainly chalky, whereas other ends of the district, other parts of the district, possibly less so. So have we done any experiments to see if things work better in particular places, or are we essentially trying the same thing everywhere and to see what happens?
We haven't done specific experiments, if you like, but we're trying the same thing everywhere, but what we are seeing is different results across the district. Royston and Baldock being primarily on chalk, which is quite poor soil, and the actual true wilding will do better on poorer, less nourished soils. The cornflowers and the sown wilding sort of approach, like on Letchworth Gate, will do better in the more substantial soils that we've got in Letchworth and Hitchin. And you'll probably see that, like on Cambridge Road, where we're working with the beekeepers in Hitchin, that the sort of wilding, the habitat that's evolved on there is very different to what we've seen in Royston. It's more of the woody, lot more vigorous type growth like mallow and sort of cow parsley and things like that. So we are going to be impacted quite heavily by the geology that we've got across the district and in various locations. A lot of the recommendations that I've seen, if we were to do it properly, would recommend stripping off the topsoil. And that isn't really practical or feasible in a highway verge because you don't know what you're going to be digging up. The only other way to do that is a cut and collect regime. So the grass grows, you cut it and you remove the arisings, which basically is what the farmers used to do that created the hay meadows that we used to have in the countryside, because they would have the fields, they would allow the grass to grow, then they would take the hay crop off to feed their animals, and they just did that year after year after year. And of course, the nutrition in that ground got less and less, creating a very niche habitat for flora and fauna. We've, like in St John Cemetery, probably not a good example of location. We left the grass to grow there, working with the Friends of group in there. And in the first 2 years, the grass just grew taller than the memorials. It just went absolutely mad. And we've had to reinstigate a mowing regime just to keep the grass under control, because it's the ground conditions there are so favourable just to grass growth. And that wouldn't happen in Royston because of the chalk conditions there. The other disadvantage is that when with chalk, it's very alkaline and it is very limiting on the sort of species choice that is going to be successful.
Okay. And presumably, given that we've had last year was very wet, previous year was very dry, that will have an impact presumably as well.
Yes, yeah, the weather conditions we saw different results last year than the previous year. Like Royston, for example, that was virtually brown, whereas last year it was green all year, and it actually grew some really good grass that people were not used to seeing. It's worthwhile noting that we've looked at all our other maintenance regimes as well, and the initiative to reduce grass cutting frequencies on our highway verges, that's having a big impact now, and we're seeing different species coming through. So we're seeing we're in May time, a flush of dandelions. The grass verges go yellow with dandelions, and then the daisies will come up. They were quite controlled with our mowing regimes. The population of dandelions in the verges has gone up exponentially. But also then we're seeing yellow hawksbit coming through later on in the year. So we're seeing different plants coming through just because we changed our mowing regime. That's cutting our carbon emissions because we're not running great big diesel lawnmowers over everything every other week. Then the other thing that we're trialing is or doing is reducing our area of seasonal bedding. Seasonal bedding was very popular 20 years ago for flowers, but it's not until you looked at the environmental impact of actually producing those flowers, which was in peat compost, in heated greenhouses that were probably transported from quite a distance away, planted into ground that was fertilized and cultivated. And then you were doing that twice a year, and those plants were thrown away after they were finished. It's very intensive and energy heavy. Whereas if you can put the cornflowers down and still have a flower display, and you're just doing that locally, that's a lot more efficient and considerate to the environment locally and wider the field.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Andrew or for any other of the presentations that happened tonight?
I don't have any. I just wanted to say that everything was very comprehensive, and thank you to everyone for their very, very detailed presentations. Thank you very much.
They were brilliant, weren't they? Thank you, Dominic. Right. Well, if that's that, then I will probably call this meeting to a close. Thank you to everybody who, the officers who helped run the meeting. Thank you to everybody who presented. And thank you to the councillors and public that have joined and participated. Really appreciate it. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Thanks, chat. Bye.
Thank you.